The paradox of enlightenment and liberation is something that is tackled within most of the Eastern traditional spiritual schools. And we find this particularly a lot within Nagarjuna's middle way, which is the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā. And the Mūlamadhyamakakārikā is a core text within the Madhyamaka schools of Buddhism. And the Madhyamaka schools of Buddhism is a part of what we now know as the Mahayana school and also Tibetan Buddhism, where Nagarjuna is revered as one of the great teachers, especially when we look at that Nalanda University in Bihar in India. That period of time was when particularly the Madhyamaka schools and Yogacara schools began to blossom and explore the non-dual reality of consciousness itself, and built on the teachings of the historical Buddha. But this is where things began to change a little bit, and this is where we have the Mahayana school and also the Tibetan schools of Buddhism. And so Nagarjuna tackles this problem of the paradox of enlightenment. Now, when we talk about the paradox of enlightenment or liberation, what are we talking about? Well, it's the I who wants to be enlightened, right? It's the me. Now, it's the Jason. Now, as you know from a lot of my other videos talking on non-dual philosophy, is that we already are that. But the problem is that we don't have a feeling of that, or we don't abide in that actual experience of that non-dual reality, because we're still an identity. And so Nagarjuna here is speaking a lot about this in Nagarjuna's middle way, about how it's us who are desiring not to desire. So we are caught in this trap of desiring not to desire. We are caught in this trap of trying to attain enlightenment as a person, but it's the person itself that is the obstacle on the path to experiencing enlightenment. And so in this text, Nagarjuna has a way of explaining this, and also a possible release from this paradox that we all find ourselves in. Being without appropriation, I shall be released. Nirvana will be mine. For those who grasp things in this way, there is the great grasping of appropriation. So the release in this verse that Nagarjuna is speaking about is the release from the bondage of samsara. This cycle we find ourselves in, living life after life, coming back as this individuality that we haven't purified or cleansed, or haven't let go of. We keep grasping, and this is what comes back life after life. To use Hindu terminology, we would say the jiva. Jiva, that individualized persona that we need to cleanse and, in a sense, eliminate or dissolve so that we don't live life after life. And this is what Nagarjuna is speaking about, is that release from that cycle, that samsara that we find ourselves in, to attain nirvana. But he says here we need to be without appropriation, which is very unusual terminology for a lot of us. But he says that we need to be without appropriation. And so what that means is ceasing to have thoughts of I, me, mine, etc. Ceasing this, because once you have this thought of I, me, mine, then it's you who wants to be enlightened, or I who wants to be enlightened. So the desire for one's liberation constitutes an obstacle to the actual attainment. And in Buddhism, this is the formulation of the paradox of liberation, is this appropriation that we have where we want to attain enlightenment, or we want to cease desire, but it's the person who wants to do that. And as we know through Buddhist philosophy, the person themselves is empty, it's shunyata, that doesn't really exist. And so holding on and grasping to this idea of the identity is the problem itself, is the obstacle itself. And so we need to release our grip of ourself here to attain enlightenment, to attain nirvana. So to put this paradox in simple terms, when one says that I want to be free, or I want to be enlightened, or I want to be liberated, then that individual is identifying with the appropriation of all of the psychological elements and aspects that make up our sense of identity, which ironically is the cause of bondage to samsara. That's the big problem. So we're going through that process, but that is the actual bondage to samsara itself. And so somehow we need to get ourselves out of the way. And it's as simple as being without appropriation, according to Nagarjuna. Look, easier said than done, right? But without those appropriating psychological elements, then we begin to release and we begin to abide in nirvana, so to speak. So the difference here between those who are enlightened and those of us still on the path is more of an orientation towards how we hold on to ourselves, how we cling to ourselves as a person. And in the modern day, a lot of people cling to anything. They'll cling to external stimuli, they'll cling to their bodily appearance, and they're not even getting down to the deeper levels that we are even talking about today. So there's actually not much chance for them in this life. Hopefully there is, but when you're concerned about a lot of the external stimuli and you're concerned about just your physical appearance and what people think of you, then you are far, far away from the source. But today we are talking about the identification itself, looking at this from a practitioner's perspective, because a practitioner's perspective, a meditative practitioner, we encounter this problem where we will sit to meditate to seek a good meditation, for example. Then after the meditation, we will say, oh, that was a terrible meditation for myself. And this way of thinking is already wrong because you're already orienting it towards your identity. And I often say to people, meditation is who you are. The person is what you do. And this different orientation will help people in their spiritual practice. Once you orient your awareness to that meditation is actually who you are, the meditative state of mind is actually your real nature, and it's the person that you do, then there's a different orientation and a clarity about yourself and about your meditation practice. And this gets down to the deeper layers of those appropriating tendencies that we have as an identity. And so this is what Nagarjuna is talking about. It's getting back into that meditative state of mind as opposed to the person we think we are. Let go of that person and allow what is already there to be the focal point of your consciousness, because that's actually what the focal point of your consciousness already is. It's just that we resonate and we identify with the bubble of consciousness, the waves of consciousness, which is the identity. And that's where all of the problems begin. And that's why Nagarjuna went to a painstaking level to deliver this knowledge for a lot of people in the time of Nalanda University. And thankfully, we continue to learn from the great master in the modern day about how to release from samsara so we can abide in the ultimate state of nirvana. Shanti, shanti, shanti.